Hi everyone, apologies for the previous video. I'm not sure why the audio was so poor, but this is what's happening when you use Harrison College property.
I am afraid that has all to do with flow.
Nothing to do with Harrison College?
No,
Okay.
all to do with flow, and flow is not a good topic with me either, so I won't start that one tonight. Good evening, folks. Hopefully we'll try this again. We've been having a few issues with the flow Wi-Fi here, and so we hope it gets better, but we don't have a choice now. We still have flow, and for now. Anyhow, the purpose of the topic this evening is that we start with the tax filings. I'll have to start again. So we start with the tax filings coming up in 2017. There's issues with the penalties being waived. So what we would like to discuss tonight is some of the challenges that we see involved in how it was structured, how they're linked, how tax certificates are linked to professional certificates as well as other duty-free certificates, and how we perceive that there are some other fundamental changes that could be addressed within the tax structure. What we would do now is we turn over to Colin. Colin will give a little bit more of the intro, and then we will then start discussing where we would like to see where some of this should go and what our thoughts and concepts should be.
Yeah, before we get a little too far in, because I know some persons don't know who is on the panel, we have Colin. Colin, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
No, I'm Colin Daniel, I'm a chartered accountant.
I know, right? And this is Dwayne Burke, and this is David Simpson. So at least everybody has an idea of who is in the background talking. Even if you don't see the person, you at least know who it is. So, off to you, Colin.
Right. In the last budget, the Minister of Finance announced a tax holiday or waiver program for penalties and interest on outstanding taxes, being income taxes, taxes on income, and value-added taxes. And David, I think you also applied to national insurance as well. Okay. So,
value-added tax, income tax, corporation
tax, land tax. The period for the tax amnesty was 6 months, from September 15th, 2016 to February 2017. And during that period, the expectations for people to come in, make arrangements to pay arrears as well, and have the penalties and interest waived. To my mind, the period in terms of making payment to get the relief for the penalties and waivers of 6 months is too short. There's one thing to say, make arrangements within the 6 months period, and we will waive the penalties and interest for 24 months, 36 months. But the expectation with this program is that the interest and penalties will only be waived on the amounts settled in this period. Given the cash flow crunch that we've had since 2008, it's an unrealistic expectation for people in Barbados to be able to settle any significant tax obligation in a 6 months period. So we need to get to the reality of what the capacity is to do certain things, and make sure that the programs that you've initiated make sense in this case. So you're going to say we're going to give you a period to make arrangements, but you want you to settle everything in the 6 months period. The banks have been pretty unkind to individuals, especially business people, in the last 8 years in particular. So even if you have the ability to raise financing, to pay interest and penalties, or to pay back taxes, you still have to have your bank convinced that if they take on the financing for that you have the capacity to repay them over a longer period of time. So we have to recognize what's the reality compared to what has been put in place.
Okay, considering that you've made the statement that 6 months is too short, what would be considered a reasonable amount of time? Because yes, I do understand, especially for some persons, that it would be different if you didn't have enough in it in 6 months.
Exactly.
But we still have to come up, and I guess there will always be some kind of disagreement as to what's considered reasonable.
Right.
But what would you suggest as
Anywhere, depending on the amount that's outstanding, anywhere between 3 years to 5 years, which means that anything that you have agreed to pay will be paid over that period of time, and the penalties and interest are waived absolutely for that 5-year period.
Right.
Okay. The objective here is
with conditionalities.
Right.
The objective here is to get the outstanding taxes paid.
Correct.
It does not make sense to say you can pay X amount. Let's say you have 10 years backlog. You're able to pay 2 years. You want your waive penalties and interest for those 2 years that you've paid. But then immediately when the tax amnesty is finished on February 15th, all the penalties and interests that are still outstanding at that time are reinstated.
Correct.
Right? And given that we moved from a point where late filing fee was $10 to late filing fees being $500, it is onerous. Another facet of the amnesty is that if you have paid, if you filed tax returns a couple of years ago and you were late, you filed late. Let's say you have 3 years filed late, but you had zero tax obligation. You have to pay $1,500 in late fees. If you had not filed them and you decide to bring all your late filings up to date and you have no tax obligation, the waiver or the program, as the last guideline that I saw, does not relieve you from the payment of the late filing fees.
Right.
So what's the incentive there?
Right.
You're trying to do 2 things. One, get taxpayers compliant, and secondly, collect outstanding taxes, not penalties and interest,
Correct.
but taxes. So what you want to do is to encourage people to get compliant.
Yeah.
So to penalize them for becoming compliant by not waiving the delayed filing fee is self-defeating.
Especially when it's that much money, because for some people that fee might be almost as much or even more than the actual taxes that they have to pay.
This is in cases where the person has zero taxes. They have zero tax payable. Okay. David?
I understand the point Colin is making. This is the 3rd time in recent history I think government has done the tax amnesty.
Yeah.
And the aim, I think the number one aim is to collect revenue for government.
Correct.
Because they're short on government, they know that there is a lot of, I want to carefully words they use. There's a mixture of default, inability to pay, lack of financing to pay, etc. The reality is, though, if we extend it, there still has to be a cutoff point at which we say the amnesty only applies up to this point, we'll give you 5 years fine. But remember, another condition of the amnesty is that you must remain current with the current taxes while you're going through the amnesty. The other alternative you have is that if you can't clear all of your back taxes with the amnesty, the BRA has been allowing you to enter into an arrangement to make monthly installments against the back taxes. So the purpose of the amnesty is really to allow you to have a waiver on the penalties and interest, because those payment plans apply to everything, tax, penalty, and interest. Yes, the aim is to get people compliant, but I think the number one aim is for government to collect revenue so that they can carry out their programs. So I think that is part of the reason why it's a small window, and if you can meet that small window, well then government becomes the beneficiary, because they still will get their revenue, but it will be incremented by the amount of the penalties and interest. The other component Colin touched on it, the commercial banks are not going to lend to clear statutory obligations. That is the fundamental flaw with the entire amnesty arrangement.
Because then where are you going to get this money
to
from?
pay a lump sum.
Yeah.
So it suggests that you have not understood that the reason we are not paying is not because you don't want to pay, is that you don't have the wherewithal to pay. But the commercial banks are being very clear, we are not lending for the payment, whether on the amnesty special arrangement, we're not lending for that purpose. So that has been an issue. I mean, I have been working with BRA and one or two people to try and take advantage of the amnesty, but in many cases, people have to determine this is the lump sum I have available now, this is what I will pay off, get the waiver of the penalties and interest applicable to that, and then I have to enter into a payment plan for the remainder while making sure I remain current with the current VAT, the current income tax, whatever the case is. So it is a challenging thing in terms of the financing for taxpayers, I think, and because especially when it comes to businesses, because we're not talking about a few dollars in income tax or even land tax for 2 years, which for a household could be significant, but at the end of the day, when compared to VAT liabilities that have been mounted on corporation tax, it is insignificant in terms of amount. But at the end of the day, for individuals or companies, it's a matter of, do I have the resources to make this lump sum payment? And having said that, businesses probably still have more wherewithal to come up with a lump sum even from their own resources than an individual might, especially where individual households are already strained in terms of resources to meet their day-to-day expenses.
One of the other facets that has to be addressed in terms of the ability to pay is that we have situations where you may have companies that are actually a debtor and creditor to the same entity, being government. And what is happening in the government scenario is the debtor is being very active, but the creditor is not. In other words, the debtor is asking you to pay, but the creditor is not paying you back. So then there's no offset in that type of scenario. And therefore, what is happening is businesses are becoming unwitting creditors to the government. They are also, in effect, having a savings bond with the government without the benefit of repayment terms or terms to that effect. Because if the government owes you, you have no idea when those funds are going to come back in. A usual elation this week was when some tax refunds came back, and those were from several years old. The other aspect of not being able to refund monies on a timely basis is the fact that you're taking money out of the economy that could have been in the cycle of money that would have been in the spend cycle. So it is regressing the economic cycle and recovery. If that money can come back into the cycle, then people will have the money to spend. Okay. In terms of the other punitive side of it, one of the aspects is that the ability to get duty-free clearance certificates as well as other professional certificates, it is linked to the tax clearance certificate. Now, there is a misconception that all people who owe the government money are unscrupulous, and has not been my experience. I don't know if it's been yours.
Yes, and that's the point I was alluding to earlier. Where it is not just refusal to pay taxes. Yeah. Some people have genuine reasons why they are unable to. I think the number of people who simply are refusing to pay tax is a very, very small minority
of the whole scheme.
Right? And when you add the challenges of business in the last 10 years and so on, it becomes a cash flow issue. I mean, you're operating a business. Some people are able to keep up with the statutory obligation in a timely manner. Some run on arrears, and there are different reasons. But I don't think at the end of the day, for any taxpayer, that is a matter of being unscrupulous at all.
Well, one of the other things too is that part of the ability to pay taxes is also linked to the inadequacy in our credit rating collection type system. In other words, we have a thing where in Barbados where companies will just not pay you. Some of them will just say, well, here's 50% or see you in court, and they know that when you go to court, the cobwebs will grow on that case before you get back your funds. So until we have like a proper credit bureau type system in place where you can clear debts properly, people can just not pay you and there's no recourse. So you have situations where your name will show up in the paper because you haven't paid statutory obligations. You're deemed or labeled a delinquent when in fact it is really business circumstances brought on by other people's lack of business commitment that's turned you into a business, that you're a negative, a
And
business
there's an
negative.
issue primarily with VAT, because VAT is done on your accruals basis, so VAT doesn't take any consideration of whether your customers have paid you or not. Once you issue the invoice, the VAT becomes payable, and it is over a 2-month period. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the 2-month period arguably was supposed to provide you enough time to have a working capital cycle that
But that's
would
not
bring in your
reality.
money. But reality, that's not
Not
reality.
reality.
So you have many people who are paying VAT, filing VAT, VAT becomes due, even
But they haven't
before they've
collected the
collected the
money
money
for
from
that.
those sales. That is an immediate
But-
cash flow issue.
But it's even compounded if you are doing business with government entities, because in some instances it takes a while to get money from a government entity. So you're compounding. In fact, you're being asked to pay and collect on VAT on an invoice that you're not being paid for. So there's a lot of facets to this thing, and it's not simple a simple just left and right, black and white type of scenario. There's a gray area in terms of the whole statutory obligation. It's not just that people do not want to pay, and I always think of it in context of a example. When in another life I was a steward at the garrison, and we took a penalty. A young jockey had not used his whip appropriately, so we took away his whip for 4 races for misuse of the whip, because we want him to ride the horse without beating it in the amount of times that he felt he should beat it. So after the second race, they saw him still in his civilian clothes, and I said, well, what's happening? Well, the reality is, by taking away the whip for 4 races, we effectively stopped him from earning a living, because no one would give him a ride for the 4 races. Had we said, well, we'll put you down for a day, then he would have not earned income for a day, and then he would have been able to continue riding, because none of the trainers wanted to give him a ride with the whip, so he could not earn any money. Similarly, in the same circumstances here, if you stop someone from earning money because of the tax clearance certificate, where for whatever reasons we just addressed, and they're not doing it from unscrupulous basis, you're limiting their ability to earn, you're limiting their ability to pay back the government when they actually do have a chance. And I said, we can't stereotype the few for the many, because I would say that there are few people who are unscrupulous and who just will not pay, but we can't penalize all. And that's just my best
Just to be
example.
devil's advocate, though, government's argument would be that you have 2 months to get your house in order. You need to fix your working capital cycle. So, if VAT is presenting a cash flow challenge because your customer is not paying, you need to put a proper credit management system in place to make sure you can collect your monies on time. So, I add that to the mix to suggest, well, whose responsibility is it at the end of the day? And it has to be a joint responsibility. Government has to consider the provision, in this case, of the VAT Act, but companies also have to consider their own credit management policies. I assume a cash-based business should not have any issues with that. Yeah. It's really those who are offering credit. So it comes down to a credit management policy and a receivables collection policy, which in itself is an investment depending on the size of the business. But just to add some balance, we can't put all of the responsibility necessarily at the feet of government, but we do want policies or tax rules that are efficient in terms of collection, but not onerous in terms of administration. And I think there was some recognition that the VAT Act was a bit onerous, then that's why they increased the ceiling from 60,000 it was.
60 to 200.
So
From 80,000 to
80,000.
200,000.
It went from 60 to 80 and then to 200,000.
Right.
So at least that's some recognition that there needs to be a more efficient mechanism to take some of the onerous burden of it off of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises primarily, because the administration of VAT and the recording necessary to facilitate VAT filings and so on could be tedious depending on the activity.
Yeah. Yeah. So just want to interject a couple of things in terms of